What's up guys, I'm BTC. Junkrat is one of the easier to play characters, but he also has one of the higher skill ceilings. This means that players are not always using him as effectively as they could. So today we're going to go over the top 5 common mistakes with Junkrat. In the early days of Overwatch, it was pretty rare to see a Junkrat, and it was almost only on defense. Now that he's been buffed with a double remote, it's actually pretty common to see Junkrat players, both on defense and attack. So let's get to it. Starting at number 5, spamming the same spot. This is a pretty big problem that I see a ton of Junkrat players doing. Whether it's on defense or attack, I've seen this thousands of times. The Junkrat player will stand in one spot and just continue firing over and over and over again. Now, there are certain situations where doing this can be helpful. For example, if your team is in the process of capturing a point, using Junkrat to spam the main entrance to prevent the enemy team from coming back is an extremely effective way of zoning out that entrance. However, that's not all that common. What is common is seeing someone try to spam their attack onto a point that you don't yet control. Simply standing far away and mindlessly spamming grenades into the same spot is not really gonna be effective. The enemy team can easily see them coming in and just avoid them. So what you want to do is always change where you're firing off those grenades. Never shoot more than 2 in the same spot, even if it's only a little bit in one direction or the other, slightly to the left, to the right, up or down, as long as you're not firing all of the shots in the same spot. And don't forget, you can bounce your attack off of walls to make it more unpredictable, and you will also land more hits. The last and most important part of this is that you also need to move around, not just adjust your aim, but reposition your character as well. Because of the way the attack works, it's very easy for the enemy players to trace back where Junkrat is standing. So move around and don't give them the opportunity to hunt you down. Number 4, stop saving your abilities. Use them, and often. One of the worst things I see Junkrat players do is they'll throw down a trap somewhere and then place a remote near it. The idea is that if someone steps in the trap, the Junkrat can trigger the remote and get a quick and easy elimination. This is extremely good at the very, very beginning of a round, but after that, it's just a massive waste that will significantly lower Junkrat's damage potential. As a Junkrat player, you should be constantly placing your steel trap in new locations and not simply leaving it somewhere and hoping that someone will walk into it. The trap is a great way to deal with Doomfist, Genji, and even Reinhardt that's charging you. Also, simply leaving a remote somewhere is a massive waste of potential damage. You should be using your double remotes all the time to buff up your damage. Hitting an enemy with a standard attack and then comboing it with a remote will do around 240 damage, enough to eliminate most of the heroes in the game. The remote mine is also a much more controllable way of dealing damage. Junkrat's standard attack can be a little finicky sometimes because of the way it lobs out at an arc, but the remote mine pretty much goes exactly where you're aiming. And also, if you're dealing with a Genji that has the deflect up, you can simply throw the remote above his head and get the elimination even when his deflect is active. Number 3, be a little more patient with the Riptire. Junkrat's ultimate is unique in that enemy players can attack it, and it's incredibly vulnerable. The Riptire can be destroyed in 1 or 2 hits, so it's very important to keep it out of line of sight as long as possible. You don't want the tire to be seen until the very last moment, and by then, it should be too late. So because of this, don't bring the tire directly toward the enemy or in front of them at all. Always try to bring the tire in from behind or from the side. And there are a couple of issues with the Riptire as well. It is by far the loudest ultimate in the game, and when the tire is moving around, it's very easy for anyone on the map to hear exactly where it's coming from. So to deal with this, don't send the tire off right away. After you use your ultimate, let the tire run into a wall for a few seconds. This might trick the enemy players into thinking that the tire was destroyed or just used up to no effect. After those few seconds, the enemy might try to move out again from behind their hiding spots. That's when you can swing the tire out and hopefully get a couple of those eliminations. Number 2, don't be afraid to engage super close. At one point, Junkrat's attacks would damage himself, but that's long since been changed. Now Junkrat can get as close as he wants and deal a ton of damage and not have to worry about hurting himself at all. But unfortunately, some players still insist on staying at a very long range and just lobbing their attacks in, when in some situations it can be a very strong tactic to get in close and put a tremendous amount of pressure on the enemy team, especially if it's in a smaller enclosed environment. Not only does Junkrat have the advantage in this situation, but the enemy often won't even try to fight back. They'll just kind of panic and try to run away. Another example is if a Winston is in your back line. If you know there's no chance of you getting away, just get right up into his face and start dealing damage. You'll make quick work of him in no time. And the number one mistake I see Junkrat players making is the spam fail on shields. The belief that he is the ultimate end-all, be-all in barrier breaking. And anytime one of those barriers appears on the screen from any source, Junkrat instantly and immediately attacks it and ignores everything else. Now, while Junkrat is quite good at damaging barriers, he should never be the only one trying to destroy them all by himself, especially when it comes to dealing with Orisa. I often see Junkrat players trying to deal with an Orisa barrier by just firing at it over and over and over again and not really making any progress, because while the Junkrat can destroy the barrier, by the time he does, the Orisa just places a brand new one in place and Junkrat is back to square one. It's a little different with Reinhardt because he actually has to step away for a second to recharge, but even still, just because there's a barrier there doesn't mean you have to attack it as the Junkrat. If you're the only one spamming into the barrier, then you're not really doing a whole lot for your team. Now, if there's no one to help you destroy the barrier, then there is some other things you can do. You can try to fire your attack and bounce it off of walls or over the barriers so that they bounce and still hit the enemy players. Or you can throw a remote over the barrier, and when it detonates, it should bounce the Reinhardt or the Orisa out of their position and make them a lot more vulnerable. Another possibility is to simply reposition yourself, so that the tank has to move his barrier in a way that blocks your damage, but then opens him up to the rest of your team. So if you ever notice that you're the only one attacking a barrier, you need to stop and ask yourself, does that barrier need to be destroyed right now? If so, I should be asking my teammates to help me with it. And if not, I should be focusing on something else. So there you have it, guys. 5 common mistakes with Junkrat. I hope this helps. If there's any other heroes that you'd like to see me go over, let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out my Discord server. Follow me on Twitch and Twitter. The links for that stuff are down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault. Also, special thanks to all my Patreon supporters for helping to make this all possible. If you'd like to see what kind of cool rewards you can get for supporting the channel, check the links on screen and down below.